It was 1498 Florida. A man named Jacopo di Poggio Bracciolini, secretary to one of the most influential diplomatic circles in all of Renaissance Italy, made a mistake that didn't look like a mistake at all. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't break a single rule. He simply spoke too openly in the wrong room. He revealed what he was hoping for. He showed what he was afraid of. He explained, in careful detail, exactly what he planned to do next. And the men sitting across from him smiled, nodded, and said nothing. 3 weeks later, his access was gone. His invitations stopped arriving. The corridors that once opened for him began to close quietly, one by one. No argument. No confrontation. No warning. Just silence. And by the time he understood what had happened, there was nothing left to recover. Not because he was weak, not because he was dishonest, but because he had made himself completely understood. And in Florence, in the age of the Medici, being understood was the beginning of the end. A young civil servant named Machiavelli was watching from the margins. He was taking notes, not just on this man, but on dozens like him, on the ones who rose and the ones who fell, on the patterns that connected them, on the invisible architecture of power that most people never saw because they were too busy performing honesty to notice what was actually happening around them. And what he saw, what he recorded in the pages that would later shake the entire Western world, was this: power does not collapse through force. It dissolves through exposure. It erodes through visibility. It disappears the moment you become readable. This is the part no one tells you. You have been taught your entire life that honesty builds trust, that openness creates connection, that explaining yourself earns respect, that the more people understand you, the more they will value you. And on the surface, in certain rooms, with certain people, at certain moments, that is true. But beneath the surface, in the rooms that actually matter, in the interactions where position and influence are quietly being renegotiated every single day, the opposite is operating. The more completely people understand you, the less they have to respect, because once you are predictable, you are manageable. And once you are manageable, you are no longer something they need to take seriously. You become a known quantity, a solved equation, and no one fears a solved equation. Stay with this, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There are 5 things about you, 5 specific layers of yourself, that must remain hidden, not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of awareness, out of the deliberate, controlled understanding that in every interaction, you are either choosing what people know about you, or you are letting them take it, and what they know about you determines what they can do to you. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about building walls. It is about becoming controlled. It is about deciding, deliberately and consciously, what people are permitted to see and what they will never touch. Because the difference between being respected and being dismissed, between having influence and slowly losing it, often comes down to one thing alone: how much of yourself you have given away. There are exactly 5 layers. We begin with the first. The first thing you must never reveal is your true intention. Not your stated goal, not your announced plan, your actual underlying intention, what you are really moving toward, what you actually want, what you are genuinely building beneath the surface of what you say out loud. Most people believe that clarity is power. Be direct. Be transparent. Say what you want so people can help you get there. And this advice sounds right because in a world of perfect trust and perfect alignment, it would be right. But that is not the world Machiavelli was studying, and it is not the world you are living in. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." He was not writing philosophy, he was writing observation. He had watched Cesare Borgia, the most strategically terrifying figure of the entire Italian Renaissance, operate for years. And what made Borgia extraordinary was not his military force, though that was considerable. It was his absolute refusal to let anyone know what he was going to do next. He would announce alliances publicly while dismantling his allies privately. He would celebrate friendships loudly while positioning himself to absorb their territories quietly. The announcement was theater. The intention was something else entirely. And by the time anyone understood the gap between what Borgia said and what Borgia meant, the result was already in place. The moment you reveal your true intention, you hand people a map. And once they have that map, they do not need to confront you openly. They simply rearrange the terrain around you. They delay the opportunity you were moving toward. They introduce a conversation that shifts your timeline. They mention something to someone, casually, that changes the temperature of a room before you even enter it. They smile while doing every single one of these things, and you will not call it interference. You will call it coincidence. You will call it bad timing. You will call it the world not cooperating. But it is not coincidence. It is preemptive defense. People protect their position always. If your intention threatens someone's comfort, influence, status, or control, even slightly, even indirectly, they will respond, not aggressively, strategically. They will slow you down by just enough that you never quite reach momentum. Look at your own life. Think about the last time you told someone, a colleague, a friend, someone in your family, exactly what you were planning to do next. Something important, something you were genuinely excited about. Think about what happened after that conversation. The energy shifted. The support felt slightly less solid. The reactions came a little slower. You thought people didn't believe in you. But that wasn't it. They believed in you just fine. What changed was that you had become a variable they now had to manage. A known quantity they had to factor into their own calculations. And they began, quietly, almost unconsciously, to adjust around you. That is why the most controlled, most powerful individuals throughout history did not speak in detailed plans. They spoke in direction. They hinted. They suggested. They moved. And by the time people understood what they had been doing, it was already finished. The more you explain, the less you control, because uncertainty creates hesitation in others. And hesitation in others is freedom for you. When people do not fully understand your next move, they pause, they second guess, they wait. And in that pause, in that space that exists between what they know and what they suspect, you move without resistance. But intentions, as important as they are not where most people suffer the deepest damage. The first thing is about what you want. The second is about what you fear. And this is where the real exposure begins. The second thing you must keep completely hidden is your weakness. Not the performed weakness. The strategic vulnerability you show selectively to build trust. The real one, the deep one. The specific place where, if pressure is applied correctly, you stop functioning rationally and begin simply reacting. Everyone has it. That is not the issue. The issue is access. Who has a map to that place inside you? Because the moment someone understands exactly where you are vulnerable, they no longer need to challenge you in the open. They simply apply pressure in the right location at the right moment. And pressure, applied with precision, always produces a reaction. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." He was talking about anticipation, about seeing what is coming before it arrives. And what he understood, watching rulers and courts and the slow machinery of Renaissance power, was that the most dangerous people in any room were not the ones with the most force. They were the ones who knew the most secrets. Specifically, the ones who knew where other people broke. Think about how this works in real life. You tell someone, maybe in a moment of genuine connection, maybe in a moment of frustration, maybe just in a relaxed conversation where your guard was down. What bothers you? What affects you? What makes you feel insecure, unheard, undervalued? And in the moment you tell them, they understand, they sympathize. They might even comfort you. But that information does not disappear when the conversation ends. It gets filed, unconsciously in most people, consciously in some. And from that moment forward, when conflict arises, when negotiation happens, when their position is under any kind of pressure, they will use it. Not always deliberately, but precisely. The argument will feel sharper than it should. The comment will land in exactly the wrong place. The situation will feel engineered in a way you cannot quite explain. You sense it, but you cannot prove it. What you are sensing is emotional leverage, and once someone holds it, you are not operating in a fair exchange. You are reacting to someone who is choosing. You do not get attacked where you are strong. You get attacked where you are open. This is not cynicism. It is the most consistent pattern in the entire history of human power dynamics. The greatest military strategists in history, from Hannibal to Sun Tzu to Napoleon, all understood the same fundamental truth. You do not challenge an opponent where they are fortified. You find the gap. You find the exposure, and you move through it. The same principle operates in every office, every family, every friendship, every relationship you have ever had. This is not a reason to shut down completely. The people who understand this the most clearly do not become closed. They become filtered. They decide what is seen and what is protected. They share vulnerability selectively with people who have earned that level of access, in situations where the exposure creates genuine connection rather than future leverage. Because vulnerability without trust is not strength. It is simply exposure. And exposure, in the wrong hands, is always eventually used. Remember this, you do not always get to know when it has been used. Sometimes the damage is invisible, a recommendation that was slightly less enthusiastic than it could have been. A door that opened slower than it should have. A hesitation that shouldn't have been there. The cost of revealed weakness is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the slow, invisible accumulation of missed opportunities. And by the time you feel it, you cannot trace it back to the conversation where it started. What I am about to tell you next is the one most people do not expect. They protect their weaknesses. They guard their fears. But they openly, almost eagerly, display the one thing that may be even more dangerous to reveal. Stay with me. The third thing you must learn to protect is your full strength. This is the one that surprises people, because you have been told your whole life to show your capability, to demonstrate what you can do, to make your value visible, and in certain contexts, job interviews, creative pitches, early relationships where you are establishing credibility, this is correct. But in ongoing dynamics, in established environments, in rooms where you are already known, revealing the full depth of your capability creates a specific, consistent, and, well, documented response in the people around you. They begin targeting you precisely where you are strongest. This is not a theory. Social psychologists call it status threat response. When people identify someone operating at a high level in a specific domain, whether that is intelligence, social fluency, physical presence, emotional control, or any other form of competence, they do not simply admire it. They calibrate against it. They measure themselves relative to it. And when that measurement produces discomfort, which in hierarchical social environments it almost always does, they respond. Not by confronting your strength directly, by pulling you somewhere else. They drag you into terrain that is unfamiliar to you. They raise challenges in domains where you are less certain. They find the edge of your capability and press against it, not to destroy you, but to establish that you are not as formidable as you appear, because that re-establishment of balance is psychologically necessary for them. Machiavelli understood this centuries before modern psychology had the language for it. He wrote that the wise prince never ceases to make himself an expert in the arts of war, but he also understood that the open display of that expertise created its own danger. He observed that the leaders who survived longest were not the ones who showed the most power. They were the ones who showed just enough power to command respect, while keeping the full depth of their capability invisible. They allowed themselves to be slightly underestimated. Not enough to be dismissed, just enough to avoid the constant friction of being someone others felt compelled to test. There is enormous freedom in underestimation. When people believe they understand the ceiling of your capability, they stop probing it. They redirect their energy elsewhere. And you move through your environment with significantly less resistance. Not because you are less powerful, but because you have chosen not to display the full measure of it. You reveal gradually. You confirm suspicions selectively. You allow people the comfort of believing they have you measured. And you keep the last layer entirely to yourself. But even this, even the management of your strength, becomes meaningless in the one moment that bypasses every rational defense you have built. It bypasses your strategy. It bypasses your self-awareness. It bypasses everything. And it happens in real time, often in less than a second. The fourth thing you must never reveal is your emotional reaction in the moment it is happening. Not your emotion, your reaction. The distinction matters enormously. Emotions are human. Emotions are necessary. What must stay invisible is the moment they register on your face, in your voice, in your posture, in the micro-expressions that cross your features in the split second before your rational mind can intervene. Because in that moment, you have given information. Specific, actionable, usable information about exactly where you can be reached. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, in his research on emotional intelligence, identified what he called the amygdala hijack, the neurological event where your brain's fear and threat response center fires approximately 80 milliseconds before your prefrontal cortex. The rational part of your brain even registers that something is happening. In those 80 milliseconds, you have already reacted. Your tone has already shifted. Your body has already moved. Your face has already shown something. And a person who is watching carefully, and some people are always watching carefully, has already read it. They have just learned something about you that you did not choose to share. The ancient Romans had a phrase that Machiavelli knew: wealth, ira fura brevis est. Anger is a brief madness, And in that madness, every wall you have carefully constructed comes down simultaneously. Every piece of information you have withheld becomes suddenly visible. Because when you are emotionally hijacked, you do not respond from strategy. You respond from reflex, and reflexes can be studied, mapped, predicted, and, by someone who understands this principle, deliberately triggered. This is not theoretical. Think about the last time someone provoked you, and you reacted before you had a chance to think. Think about what you said in those first few seconds. Think about what you revealed about what mattered to you, what threatened you, what you were afraid of. You gave a complete map of your interior in the space of a breath, and the person across from you, whether they acted on it consciously or not, now knows more about how to affect you than any conversation you have ever had. The people who understand this principle operate differently in conflict. When something is said that should produce a reaction, they pause. Not a dramatic pause. A breath, a single second of conscious choice between the stimulus and the response. Viktor Frankl, who survived the most dehumanizing conditions in human history in the Nazi concentration camps, wrote that in that space between stimulus and response lies a human being's greatest freedom. The Stoics called it the pause of the sage. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it in his private journals, the ones he never intended anyone else to read. As the practice he returned to every single day of his life. You do not need to become a stone. You do not need to be unreachable or robotic. What you need is the 1 second. The single breath that returns the choice to you. Because the moment you are choosing your response instead of defaulting to it, you are no longer giving information. You are controlling what is seen. And the person who triggered you, who was expecting a reaction, suddenly receives nothing. Just a steady, unreadable presence. And that absence of reaction is more powerful than any response you could have given. It creates uncertainty. It creates the impression of depth, and depth is the foundation of every form of respect. The calmer you appear, the less they know. The less they know, the less they can do. And the less they can do, the more freely you move. But there is one final thing. One layer that sits beneath all of the others. One vulnerability that, if exposed, makes every other protection meaningless. It does not come from your enemies. It never does. It comes from the people you love most. And it is the reason Machiavelli left one warning that almost no one ever quotes. The fifth and most dangerous thing you must never fully reveal. The one that has destroyed more powerful people throughout history than any enemy, any army, or any plan that went wrong, is the full depth of your attachments. What you love, who you cannot lose, what you value so deeply that the threat of losing it would make you irrational. Because the moment someone understands what you love with that kind of depth, they no longer need to fight you. They simply hold what you love between you and everything you are trying to do. And you stop. In the Iliad, the oldest sustained story of power and war in the Western world, Achilles was, by every measure, the most formidable warrior alive. Physically untouchable, psychologically extraordinary, his enemies could not defeat him on the battlefield. They tried. The cost was devastating and one-sided. And then one of them realized something. They could not break Achilles by attacking Achilles. But there was someone Achilles loved above his own life. His companion Patroclus. And the moment that knowledge moved from observation to weaponization, everything changed. Patroclus was sent into danger. Achilles, consumed by grief and rage, abandoned every strategic principle he had ever operated by. He threw himself into conflict that was no longer rational. He made decisions not from strength but from wound. He became, in the most precise sense, controllable, not because he had been defeated, but because what he loved had been used against him. Machiavelli saw this same pattern repeated in the courts and families of Renaissance Italy with extraordinary consistency. He observed that the most dangerous vulnerability a ruler could have was not a weak army or an empty treasury. It was a visible attachment, a child they could not bear to lose, a mistress whose safety could be threatened, a family member whose reputation could be damaged. The moment that attachment became known to the right people, it became a negotiating tool, and negotiations conducted under that kind of leverage are never negotiations at all. They are simply instructions dressed in the language of choice. Think about how this operates in your own life right now. The people who are trying to influence you, who are trying to move you in directions that serve them, not you, rarely try to force you. Force is expensive, visible, and risky. Instead, they identify what you love, they watch what you protect, they notice where your energy goes, where your anxiety lies, what makes you speak more quickly or more carefully, and then they apply pressure there, not on you, on what you value, and you respond. Not because you are weak, because you are human, because the things that make you strong are the same things that make you reachable. This does not mean you stop loving. It does not mean you build a life of strategic detachment. What it means is that the full depth of your attachment, the specific way a particular person or situation or outcome holds your heart, is not public information. You love deeply, you love fiercely, but you choose who sees it. You choose what is visible and what is protected. You do not advertise what you cannot afford to lose, because once that information exists in the world, you cannot take it back. And the people who would use it will not announce that they are doing so. They will simply adjust their behavior until yours produces exactly the response they were waiting for. The Medici family understood this so completely that they kept their closest relationships almost entirely private. Lorenzo de' Medici, one of the most powerful figures of the entire Renaissance, was described by his contemporaries as a man you felt you knew. Charming, warm, present, accessible, and yet no one could quite say with certainty what he truly valued above all else. He made himself feel known without actually being known. He created the impression of full openness while keeping the innermost room locked. And that one distinction between appearing open and being open was the difference between his survival and the fate of every man around him who had been fully understood. So now you have all five, and I want you to feel the weight of them together, because each one connects to the others in a way that becomes important. Your intentions, if revealed, allow people to reposition themselves before you reach your goal. Your weaknesses, if revealed, become the exact location where pressure will be applied. Your full strength, if revealed, invites constant testing and friction from people measuring themselves against you. Your emotional reactions, if revealed in real time, hand over a control panel that anyone can use. And your attachments, if revealed with full depth, give the people around you the only weapon that cannot be defended against, because it does not come at you. It comes at what you love. These are not separate problems. They are one problem. The problem of visibility. The problem of being too knowable. The problem that Machiavelli spent his entire career documenting in the careers of the people around him. The ones who fell not because they were outmatched, but because they were outread. And here is what changes when you understand this. Not in theory, but in practice, in your actual daily life. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself when someone questions you. Because you understand now that every explanation is a map. You pause before you react. Not dramatically, one breath, 1 second, but enough to choose rather than default. You stop announcing what you are going to do and you start simply doing it. You let people wonder. You let them speculate. You let the uncertainty sit in the room, because you now understand that uncertainty about you is not discomfort for you, it is protection. You become more deliberate about what you share and with whom. Not because you trust no one, but because you understand that access to your interior world is something that must be earned at a level of consistency and demonstrated loyalty before it is given. You become someone who is felt more than understood, someone who creates presence without creating a complete picture, and that quality, that controlled, deliberate incompleteness, is what the most formidable people in every room in history have always carried. Think about the last time you gave too much away, the last time you reacted before you chose, the last time you revealed something in a moment of openness that later became the exact place where someone applied pressure. You felt the shift. You felt what left you in that moment. You may not have had the language for it, but you felt it. That was power, not taken from you by force, given away in the course of a conversation you thought was safe, and most people never recover it. Not because they cannot, but because they never change the behavior. They repeat it, same pattern, different people, different rooms, same cost. So from this moment you move differently. You do not become cold. You become controlled. You do not shut down. You become deliberate. You do not stop trusting. You start deciding who has earned the level of access they are currently operating with. You pause before you speak. You choose before you react. You decide before you reveal. Every word becomes intentional. Every silence becomes strategic. Every moment of stillness becomes a message that says more than any explanation you could have offered. Because the moment you stop giving people access to what drives you, what breaks you, what you love, what you fear, and what you are building, is the moment they lose the ability to manage you. And when that happens, something shifts. You feel it. People hesitate. They second guess. They begin to wonder what you know, what you are planning, what you might do next. Not because you said anything threatening, but because you said nothing at all. And silence in the hands of someone who understands this is not emptiness. It is the most complete form of power there is. So go to the comments right now. Write one sentence. Write, "I control what they see," not as a performance, not for anyone else watching, as a decision, as the mark of the moment something shifted in how you understand yourself and the world you are operating in. Because you are not the same person who pressed play on this video. You have seen something now that cannot be unseen. Say less, move quietly, and let them wonder.